Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Mac, and today we're talking about the latest update for Elemental Shaman in the Prepatch and Beta, and boy do I have good news. After months of effectively zero updates, Elemental was finally mentioned in the patch notes. However, that's where the good news ends because the one mention we did get happened to be a nerf. After that long period of silence, we finally show up, and it's a 5% overall aura nerf plus a 10% nerf to Lightning Bolt on top just to kick us when we're down. I'm going to start off talking about my thoughts with this nerf, as well as why it might have happened, but if you want to skip that and just get right into the rotation and build changes, I have timestamps you can use to jump ahead. In Raid, this update is pretty simple and honestly pretty boring. There is zero gameplay change here, it's just a pure damage loss. Between the 5% aura nerf and the additional 10% lightning bolt nerf on top of that, Elemental ends up losing around 6% overall damage. This isn't necessarily going to destroy this spec, but it definitely hurts us, especially since while we were solid in Raid, we were never top tier by any stretch of the imagination. What makes this more frustrating, however, is that the tuning here was very clearly aimed at single target raid damage. This feels like Blizzard is looking at raid logs, deciding Elemental is a little bit too comfortable, and then pulling a lever without thinking about what else that lever might do or what it connects to. And that's where Mythic Plus comes in, because Mythic Plus is where the update actually kinda matters. Before this patch, Elemental had a real choice between Stormbringer and Farseer, and in terms of overall damage, the two builds were comparable. Stormbringer was harder to play and harder to optimize. It had a higher skill ceiling, required better execution, and punished mistakes more heavily than Farseer did. But when it was played well, it definitely held its own compared to Farseer and could even pull ahead in certain situations. Farseer, on the other hand, was the more consistent option between the two. It was easier to execute, more reliable from pull to pull, and far less punishing when things didn't line up perfectly. Because of that, it was already the best choice for most players in every situation, even though Stormbringer remained completely viable and, at least theoretically, could technically out-DPS Farseer in Mythic Plus. However, with these nerfs, that balance is effectively gone. Elemental is being pushed even harder into this lava-focused playstyle, and because Farseer's entire kit revolves around Lava Burst, it benefits, or more accurately I should say, it cares less about this nerf due to the way the spec is currently tuned. Meanwhile, Stormbringer gets caught in the blast radius of this nerf with the classic Blizzard shotgun tuning approach, where they're focused on raid single target getting adjusted and everything else just has to deal with it. Even if Stormbringer's damage still looks comparable in certain situations, I cannot realistically recommend it anymore, not in Mythic Plus, and honestly, not in any form of content. At this point, the game is so heavily incentivizing Lava Burst that if you aren't playing Farseer in all forms of content, you're basically griefing yourself. To be honest, it's not hard to notice how different this feels compared to other specs that get very fast and very targeted responses the moment their Discord shuts down or someone complains loud enough on Twitter. We go an entire month with no meaningful mentions in the patch notes, no acknowledgement of player issues that they've been pointing out, and then when we finally do show up in the patch notes, the first real change we get is a nerf. And that's really the frustrating part for me because it's not necessarily that we got nerfed, it's that this feels like they're tuning without care as kind of an afterthought because Elemental players aren't as loud as Paladin or Mage players. But enough mauling, let's talk about our talents and how that actually changes our builds. For Raid, honestly not much changes at all. We're still working our way down the left side of the tree to pick up the free Elemental Blast from Fusion of Elements and Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod alone is an extra 8% damage on our Lightning Bolt, so it's still very much worth taking in single target environments, even though Lightning Bolt just got nerfed by 10%. We also don't care about the Voltaic Blaze Purging Flames buff uptime in Raid like we do in Mythic Plus. So in Raid, Voltaic Blaze is mostly just there to help us maintain Flame Shock uptime. We're not focused on playing around AoE meatballs, it's really just a maintenance tool that we use. Because of that, nothing about our rotation changes. We're still prioritizing spending Maelstrom with Earthshock, then sending Lava Burst, and then filling with Lightning Bolts. It's the same flow and priorities, with the only real difference being that all of the damage is just now hitting a little bit weaker than it did before. For Mythic Plus, however, there is a little bit of a change here because we're going from Stormbringer to Farseer hero talents. This doesn't change our priority system overall, but it absolutely changes how often we're doing the new part of our rotation, which is slinging those meatballs. Since we're no longer playing Stormbringer, we can also remove the point from Lightning Rod. But to be clear, this isn't because Lightning Rod suddenly became bad. We would still love to pick it up, with Chain Lightning being a big part of our damage in AoE. The problem is that we just can't afford it anymore. With the way the tree is laid out, we need these points deeper in the bottom of the tree to go into Crackling Fury. Dropping those points into this reduces Voltaic Blaze's cooldown by 6 seconds, and that is simply too powerful to pass up. Aside from those changes, the priority remains exactly the same. We're still spending Maelstrom first with Earthquake, then we're sending Voltaic Blaze on cooldown, consuming it with Lava Burst as quickly as possible, and then we're filling with Chain Lightning in between. The difference here is frequency. We're not changing what we press, we're just pressing the important buttons more often. And really, when I say important buttons, I mean to say Voltaic Blaze. More Voltaic Blaze means more meatballs, means more damage. It's as simple as that. For Raid, the rotation is extremely straightforward and honestly unchanged from what we've already been playing. First, you send your cooldowns on cooldown. This means your Ascendance, Stormkeeper, Ancestral Swiftness. There is no reason to sit on any of these aside from syncing them all up together for a massive burst window. You should realistically get 4 Ancestral Guidances and 2 Stormkeeper casts in between every Ascendance cast. But after that, your top priority is spending Maelstrom. That's either Earthshock or Earthquake, but the key point here is that you never want to cap on Maelstrom. Once Maelstrom is handled, you're casting Lava Burst as often as you can. You also want to make sure Flame Shock stays active with, ideally, 100% uptime. In Raid, Voltaic Blaze is only a maintenance buff used for your Flame Shock uptime to make sure that your Lava Burst crit. And finally, outside of all of those situations, Lightning Bolt is just your filler spell. This is our brand new, super engaging, fun, and rewarding gameplay we have to look forward to in Midnight. But now, let's review the Mythic Plus rotation because, as you can likely tell from my facial expression, it is just as engaging and rewarding. Just like in Raid, you're using your cooldowns on cooldown. Ascendance, Stormkeeper, and Ancestral Swiftness should be used aggressively and as often as possible. Maelstrom spending is still at the top priority, with Earthquake as your default spender, in AoE, and Earthshock in single target. After that, Lava Burst is only cast when you have the Purging Flames buff, which comes from casting Voltaic Blaze. Outside of that buff window, you do not cast Lava Burst in AoE. Because of that, Voltaic Blaze becomes extremely important. You want to cast Voltaic Blaze on cooldown and then immediately consume that Purging Flames buff with Lava Bursts as quickly as possible. If you want to min-max here, you can wait to consume that until you get a Lava Surge proc because we're getting them so frequently now. You can then spend your other globals chanting Chain Lightnings while the Voltaic Blaze cooldown comes back up. The only caveat here is you don't want to be sitting on your Voltaic Blaze button any longer than a second because that's where a lot of damage comes from. But once you've spent your Maelstrom and you've consumed your Purging Flames buff with Lava Burst, you're just filling with Chain Lightning. So the Mythic Plus rotation is very much a cycle of spend Maelstrom, Voltaic Blaze on cooldown, dump Purging Flames buff on one Lava Burst, and then fill with Chain Lightning until your next Blaze window. But that is Elemental right now. Same buttons, same priority, just with fewer options and a very strong suggestion from Blizzard that Lava Burst is your entire personality going forward. If you like lava builds and slinging meatballs, then you're probably feeling pretty okay with this. But if you enjoyed Lightning, Stormbringer, or having meaningful build choices depending upon your content, well, I hope you enjoyed that while it lasted. And let's just finish this off with clarity here, because I want to be clear that Elemental isn't unplayable. We're not broken, and we're not going to be getting benched across the board, but we are extremely one-dimensional right now. There is basically one correct way to play the spec, and that is Farseer's grandma and grandpa's. And that's the frustrating part for me. Not the nerf itself, but the fact that the first real meaningful attention Elemental has gotten in weeks came without addressing any of the issues people have been talking about for months. No quality of life improvements, no talent cleanups, no attempt to make Lightning competitive, no mention of being literally the squishiest class in the game. And to be clear, no matter how hard Hopeful tries to convince people that title belongs to mages, it's absolute copium. Shamans are back to being the squishiest class in the game with a single defensive button to our name. So for the rest of the pre-patch, and likely the remainder of the beta, my recommendation is simple. Play Farseer. Build around Lava Burst. Accept that Voltaic Blaze is going to be your new best friend, and if Blizzard decides to finally give Elemental some love actually later on, we can pretend we didn't spend months throwing meatballs at everything. As always, if something changes, I'll update you, but for now, that's what we got. If you've got thoughts, whether you're trying to make Stormbringer work, or just think I'm mauling, drop them in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on the latest Elemental update. But that's all I have for today, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Definitely won't be seeing you in the next patch notes, that's for sure.